Shunned for her smell, the little girl was alone, until a rancher bathed her and gave her a home. She was different from the other children in her village, not because of the way she looked or spoke, but because of a condition she could not control. It made her skin smell in a way that others found unpleasant. The smell was not her fault, yet it shaped the way everyone around her treated her. From an early age, she learned that people would judge her before they even knew her. The whispers, the pointed fingers, and the sudden turns of children walking away from her became part of her daily life. Her parents loved her deeply. They tried everything they could think of: ointments, special baths, and even visits to distant doctors, but nothing could fully solve the problem. Sometimes Leela's mother would hug her tightly and say, "It is not your fault, my dear. You are perfect as you are." But as comforting as those words were, they could not stop the hurt that came from the world outside their small home. Leela longed to play with other children, to run and laugh like they did, to feel the warmth of friendship and companionship. But every time she reached out, every time she tried to join a game, the other children would pull back, their eyes wrinkled with disgust, their whispers turning into cruel names that she could never forget. School was the hardest place of all. Teachers tried to be fair, but the other students' behavior could not be controlled. Leela would sit quietly at the back of the classroom, hoping not to be noticed. Sometimes she raised her hand to answer a question or show she knew the lesson, but she learned quickly that speaking up often invited ridicule. Her classmates would scrunch their noses, whisper behind their hands, or even make faces as she spoke. The more they rejected her, the smaller Leela felt. She began to believe that maybe she was destined to be alone forever. At home, her parents tried to protect her from the harshness of the village, but they could not be with her all the time. Leela spent long hours wandering outside, her small feet carrying her to hidden corners of the village where no one could see her. She discovered secret places where she could sit and watch the world without being part of it. Under a large old tree near the edge of the village, she would sit for hours, listening to the birds, feeling the breeze, and imagining a world where she belonged. Sometimes she would watch other children playing in the distance, laughing and chasing each other, wishing with all her heart that she could join them without fear. Despite the loneliness, Leela had a special connection with animals. Stray dogs and cats, chickens that wandered near the fields, even birds that nested in trees seemed to understand her. Unlike the children and adults in the village, the animals did not care about her smell. They approached her without hesitation, rubbed against her, and sometimes even slept beside her. She would talk to them softly, telling them stories, sharing her dreams and crying when she felt hurt. The animals became her companions, her confidants, and in many ways her family. She named each one carefully, giving them personalities and roles in the imaginary stories she created. A small, scruffy dog named Toby became her brave protector. A calico cat named Patches was her clever advisor. Even a tiny bird she called Chirp became her messenger, carrying her thoughts into the trees. The village, however, remained unkind. Neighbors avoided her, shopkeepers whispered when she walked by, and sometimes complete strangers would glare at her as though she were a problem to be solved rather than a child. Leela learned to notice every sign of rejection: the sideways glance, the abrupt turn, the deliberate space left around her in a group. Every incident added to a growing wall of sadness around her heart. But in her solitude, she also discovered her inner strength. She began to read, losing herself in stories of other worlds, of characters who overcame challenges far greater than hers. Books became her friends, filling her mind with ideas, dreams, and hope. She read stories of courage, kindness, and love, imagining that maybe one day someone would see her as she truly was, a kind, gentle, and capable girl. Her parents noticed the changes in her. They saw how she had become quieter over the months and years, how she hesitated to speak even at home, how she flinched when strangers looked at her. They worried deeply, yet they also admired her resilience. Even in the face of constant rejection, Leela had not stopped caring. She still helped animals, still offered a smile to her parents, and still hoped for a better future. It was as though her heart had grown wider to hold the pain of the world and still find room for love. Sometimes, though, the sadness overwhelmed her. At night she would lie in bed, clutching a small stuffed toy that had been a gift from her mother, and cry silently. She cried for the friends she would never have, for the games she could never join, for the whispers and the cruelty that seemed endless. But even in her tears, she found small sparks of hope. She imagined a day when she would be accepted, when someone would care for her not despite her condition, but because of who she was inside. She imagined a home where she could feel safe, loved, and free. Leela's routine became a delicate balance of hiding and dreaming. She avoided crowds, walked along quiet paths, and stayed in places where she could blend into the shadows. Yet she never let herself give up entirely. She still smiled at animals, still tried to help her parents, and still clung to the hope that life could change. In her quiet way, she was learning patience, endurance, and the power of kindness in a world that had been unkind to her. Her life in the village was lonely, but it was not without moments of beauty. She noticed the colors of the sunrise, the sound of rain on rooftops, the way flowers bloomed in secret corners. She learned to find joy in small things, watching a butterfly, hearing a bird sing, feeling the warmth of the sun on her skin. These small joys became her refuge, reminders that the world still held goodness even when people did not. And then on one ordinary afternoon, something happened that Leela could not have imagined. As she wandered along a path she had never taken before, she noticed a large ranch at the edge of the village. Smoke curled from the chimneys, and animals roamed freely in the fields. Leela paused, curious but cautious. The ranch seemed alive with warmth, a place where laughter and care existed. For the first time in a long time, she felt a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, there could be a place for her in the world after all. Leela's curiosity about the ranch grew day by day. From a distance, she would watch the animals moving freely across the green fields. The cows grazed calmly, the horses galloped gracefully, and chickens pecked happily along the soft dirt. The sight of it all made her heart swell with a longing she could hardly put into words. She had never been inside a place like this, so full of life, warmth, and care. The ranch seemed like a world apart from the harshness she had known in her village. Yet, even as she admired it from afar, fear held her back. What if the people there, too, rejected her? What if they noticed her smell and turned her away like everyone else had? One afternoon, the temptation to get closer became too strong. Leela carefully approached the edge of the property, keeping herself hidden behind bushes and tall grass. She moved quietly, as if she were part of the shadows, afraid that any sudden movement might alert the people inside. Her eyes widened with wonder as she saw a man walking toward the barn. He was middle-aged, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. His hands were rough from work, yet there was a softness in the way he moved and spoke to the animals. Leela felt a strange warmth in her chest, a feeling she had not experienced in years. It was curiosity mixed with hope, a tiny spark that made her believe there could be goodness in the world for her too. The man noticed Leela almost immediately. Perhaps it was the way she hesitated at the edge of the field, or the way her eyes shone with a mixture of fear and wonder. He approached slowly, his voice calm and welcoming. "Hello there," he said softly. "What's your name?" No one had spoken to her so kindly before. She wanted to run, to hide, but something in his eyes stopped her. They were not filled with judgment or disgust. They were filled with curiosity and warmth. Slowly, she whispered, "El Leela." She had never met an adult who had spoken to her without turning away or frowning. Her voice came out soft, almost hesitant. I like them a lot," she admitted. Mr. Hayes smiled. "Well, you're welcome to come closer. Don't worry, I won't hurt you." Slowly, she stepped out from her hiding place. The man didn't flinch, didn't make a face, didn't step back. Instead, he knelt down and extended his hand in a friendly gesture. Leela hesitated for a moment, then placed her small hand in his. It was the first time in years that she felt safe being touched by an adult outside her family. As they walked together toward the barn, Leela noticed how clean and welcoming the place was. The air smelled of hay and fresh earth, and the animals moved around freely without fear. She watched as Mr. Hayes gently patted a horse on its mane and spoke to a cow as though it were an old friend. Leela's eyes widened in admiration. She had never seen someone treat animals with such patience and care. She wanted to be part of this world, even just for a little while. Mr. Hayes noticed her hesitation and crouched down to speak to her again. "You know, Leela, it seems like you care about animals very much. They can tell when someone is kind and they'll trust you. That's a special gift." They don't care about my smell like other people do." She had spent her life feeling unwanted and rejected, believing that her smell made her unlovable. Yet here was someone who spoke to her as though she mattered, as though she was important. She felt a flicker of hope she had almost forgotten. After a while, Mr. Hayes led her to a small wooden tub filled with warm water. "I know this might feel strange," he said gently, "but I think you could use a bath. I have some special soap here, herbs that make the skin feel fresh and clean. It's nothing to be ashamed of." She looked into Mr. Hayes's eyes, searching for any sign of mockery, but found none. They were filled with patience and kindness, and that gave her courage. "Okay," she whispered, her voice barely audible. As Mr. Hayes helped her into the tub, he spoke softly to her, explaining each step so she would feel comfortable. He poured warm water over her small shoulders, letting it rinse away not just dirt, but also the weight of loneliness she carried. He gently applied the herbal soap, and the scent of flowers and fresh herbs filled the air. Leela closed her eyes, letting herself relax for the first time in years. She felt cared for, accepted, and safe, a feeling so foreign and precious that tears welled up in her eyes. For a long time she sat in the tub, letting the warm water soothe her and the gentle scrubbing wash away the pain of rejection. Mr. Hayes did not rush her. He spoke softly about the animals, telling her stories about the horses, the cows, and the chickens, making her laugh and feel included. Leela had never imagined that someone could be so patient, so understanding, and so kind. She felt a warmth in her heart that she had never known before, a sense that perhaps life could change for the better. After the bath, Mr. Hayes helped her dry off and dress. He handed her a clean dress, simple but comfortable, and helped her comb her hair. Leela felt like a new person, not because her condition had disappeared entirely, but because she had been treated with love and respect. For the first time in her life, she did not feel ashamed of herself. She felt seen. She felt valued. Over the next few days, Leela returned to the ranch whenever she could. Mr. Hayes welcomed her every time, letting her help feed the animals, collect eggs, and even learn a little about caring for the horses. She began to understand the rhythm of the ranch, the quiet work, and the simple joys it brought. The animals responded to her kindness, just as she had always imagined, and she felt a sense of belonging that she had never experienced in the village. More importantly, Leela began to trust Mr. Hayes. She told him stories about her life, about the loneliness she had endured, and about the cruelty of people who judged her without knowing her. Mr. Hayes listened patiently, never interrupting, never judging. He offered comfort with his words, reassurance with his actions, and a safe space for her to be herself. Leela's heart, which had been heavy with sadness, began to feel lighter. She realized that one person's kindness could make a world of difference. The villagers continued their whispers and stares, but Leela began to carry herself differently. She walked with a quiet confidence, knowing that there was a place where she was accepted, where she was loved. The ranch became her sanctuary, a place where she could be free from judgment and cruelty. She found joy in simple things: the warmth of the sun on her face, the laughter of a chicken chasing a bug, the soft nuzzle of a horse's nose against her hand. Every small moment of happiness reminded her that life was not all pain, that goodness existed in unexpected places, and that she was capable of love and being loved in return. And so, what began as a hesitant curiosity about a distant ranch turned into a life-changing bond. Leela found hope, trust, and the first real sense of belonging she had ever known. She realized that sometimes, the world could surprise you with kindness when you least expected it. The simple act of being welcomed, bathed, and cared for by Mr. Hayes opened the door to a life she had only dreamed about, a life where she could be herself without fear, where she could be loved despite her differences, and where she could finally begin to imagine a future filled with hope and happiness. Leela's life began to change in ways she had never imagined. The ranch, once a distant dream she could only peek at from afar, had become her safe place, a haven where she felt accepted and valued. Every morning she would wake with excitement, wondering what new things the day would bring. She looked forward to seeing the animals, to hearing their gentle noises, and to spending time with Mr. Hayes, the man who had changed her life with nothing more than kindness and patience. The animals seemed to sense the difference in her, too. Toby, the scruffy little dog she had befriended early on, would run to greet her at the edge of the barn, wagging his tail so vigorously that it seemed he could hardly contain his happiness. Patches, the calico cat, would weave between her legs as she walked, purring contentedly. Even the horses, massive and intimidating to most children, responded to her soft voice and gentle hands. Leela felt a sense of pride and belonging she had never experienced before. Here, her touch and care were valued, and the creatures she nurtured gave her their trust in return. Each day, Mr. Hayes taught her something new about the ranch. He showed her how to feed the animals properly, how to clean their pens, and how to observe their behavior to ensure they were healthy. Leela absorbed everything eagerly. She loved learning, and for the first time she felt that her efforts mattered. Mr. Hayes never rushed her or criticized her mistakes. Instead, he explained patiently, encouraging her to try again if she stumbled. This gentle guidance allowed Leela to grow not just in skill but in confidence. She began to believe in herself in ways she had never dared to before. The bath that had once been a moment of vulnerability had now become a memory she cherished. It was more than cleanliness. It had been an act of trust, an experience that showed her that the world could be kind and nurturing. Mr. Hayes had helped her see that there was nothing wrong with her, that her value was not determined by her smell or by the judgments of others. Slowly, the walls of fear and self-doubt that had built up around her heart began to crumble. She started to smile more often, to laugh genuinely, and even to speak up when she had something to share. Leela's connection with the animals deepened with every passing day. She began to understand their personalities, their moods, and even their small gestures of affection. Toby would often nuzzle her hand when she was feeling sad, as if sensing her emotions and offering comfort. Patches would curl up on her lap while she read, providing warmth and companionship. She learned the subtle cues of the horses, the flick of an ear, the swish of a tail, the soft nickering sound they made when content, and it filled her with a sense of wonder. Leela realized that caring for others, even animals, required patience, observation, and empathy, and she embraced these lessons wholeheartedly. One afternoon, while helping Mr. Hayes collect eggs from the chicken coop, Leela felt a sense of accomplishment that she had never experienced in the village. She carefully gathered each egg, counting them and placing them gently in a basket, making sure none cracked. Mr. Hayes watched her with a proud smile. "You've got a natural touch, Leela," he said. "You handle them so carefully. It's a rare gift to be that gentle and attentive." Compliments were something she had seldom received, and to hear them now from someone she respected and admired felt incredible. She realized that she was capable of more than she had ever believed. Each task on the ranch, no matter how small, gave her confidence, a sense of purpose, and a reminder that she was valued. Beyond the daily chores, Mr. Hayes encouraged Leela to explore her own interests. He brought her books about animals, farming, and nature. He encouraged her to draw pictures of the animals, to write stories about her experiences, and to observe the changing seasons around the ranch. Leela found herself becoming more creative, more curious, and more connected to the world. She began to dream not just of surviving but of thriving, of making a difference in ways she had never imagined possible. The bond between Leela and Mr. Hayes grew stronger with time. He became not just a mentor but a guardian and friend. He listened to her fears, comforted her when she was sad, and celebrated her successes, no matter how small. Leela, who had once felt invisible and unwanted, now felt seen and cherished. She realized that trust could be built slowly, carefully, and gently, and that it was possible to find people in the world who would accept her fully. Despite the happiness she found on the ranch, Leela's past was never far from her mind. She still remembered the whispers of the villagers, the cruel faces of children who had laughed at her, and the moments when she had felt utterly alone. Yet, each day she spent at the ranch, she felt a little stronger, a little braver, and a little more ready to face the world outside. Mr. Hayes encouraged her to be proud of who she was, to never let the cruelty of others define her. One day, while walking through the fields, Leela noticed a small, injured bird lying in the grass. Its wing was bent at an odd angle, and it chirped weakly for help. Leela's heart ached for the tiny creature. She gently scooped it up, cradling it in her hands, and brought it to Mr. Hayes. Together, they cleaned the bird, applied a mild herbal ointment, and placed it in a small box with soft cloths for warmth. Leela watched as the bird gradually began to recover, feeling a profound sense of satisfaction and purpose. In that moment, she realized that helping others, even the smallest of creatures, could bring immense joy and meaning. The ranch became a place of transformation not just for Leela but for the animals she cared for. She learned to nurse sick animals back to health, to calm frightened creatures, and to recognize the signs of hunger, thirst, or illness. Each act of care reinforced her sense of competence and self-worth. Leela was no longer just a lonely, rejected girl. She was a caregiver, a helper, and a friend to the animals who trusted her completely. As weeks turned into months, Leela began to notice changes in herself. Her self-esteem grew, her laughter became more frequent, and her fear of rejection slowly faded. She started to enjoy the company of other children in the village, even if only from a distance, and she realized that kindness and confidence could change how people perceived her. Leela's experiences on the ranch taught her a valuable lesson, that true beauty and worth are not determined by appearances or the judgments of others, but by the way one treats others and the strength of one's heart. The evenings at the ranch were especially magical. Leela would sit by the barn, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. The animals would settle around her, and Mr. Hayes would share stories of his own childhood, teaching her about life, patience, and the importance of compassion. Leela felt a deep sense of peace she had never known before. For the first time, she believed that life could be kind, that love could be unconditional, and that she had a place in the world where she truly belonged. One particularly quiet evening, Mr. Hayes looked at Leela with a gentle smile. "You've grown so much, Leela," he said, "not just in skill but in heart. You've learned to care, to trust, and to be brave. Never forget that. The world is full of challenges, but you are stronger than you realize." The lessons she had learned on the ranch were not just about caring for animals. They were about caring for herself, about believing in her own worth, and about finding strength in kindness and perseverance. By now, the village had begun to notice a change in Leela. When she walked through the streets, she held her head high, no longer shrinking from the stares of others. She carried herself with quiet confidence, a reflection of the love and guidance she had received at the ranch. Some villagers still whispered, but many began to see her in a new light, someone brave, gentle, and capable. Leela's transformation was not just physical or outward. It was a profound change in spirit, confidence, and self-worth. Through it all, the ranch remained her sanctuary. The animals, the open fields, and Mr. Hayes's gentle guidance continued to nurture her growth. Leela had learned that love and kindness, once found, could heal wounds that words and judgment could never reach. She had learned that even in a world that could be cruel, there were places and people that offered acceptance, compassion, and hope. Leela's story on the ranch was far from over, but by this point she had discovered something priceless, that she could thrive, that she could care deeply, and that she could be loved for exactly who she was. She had found a place where she belonged, a mentor who believed in her, and a life filled with purpose, connection, and hope. The once lonely girl, shunned for her smell and left to wander alone, was now a young girl filled with confidence, joy, and the knowledge that she could face the world with courage. Time passed on the ranch, and Leela's life continued to change in ways she had never imagined possible. What had once been a lonely existence, filled with fear and rejection, was now a life full of love, care, and purpose. The ranch had become more than a refuge, it had become her home, the place where she could be herself without shame or fear. Every day brought new lessons, new joys, and new experiences, and Leela embraced them all with a heart that was growing stronger and braver by the day. Mr. Hayes continued to guide her patiently. He showed her how to plan the daily chores, how to care for the animals in every season, and how to solve problems when things went wrong. Leela learned to mend fences, repair water troughs, and even ride the horses properly. Each skill she mastered gave her a sense of pride she had never felt before. More importantly, these activities taught her responsibility and perseverance, qualities that would help her in every part of life. She realized that even small actions, done with care and patience, could make a big difference. The animals remained her closest companions. Toby, the scruffy little dog, was always by her side, ready to comfort her when she felt sad or frightened. Patches, the calico cat, often curled up on her lap while she worked, purring softly as if sharing in her joy. Even the horses, who had seemed intimidating at first, had come to trust her completely. Leela's care for them went beyond simple chores. She learned to understand their moods, to anticipate their needs, and to notice when something was wrong. Through her bond with the animals, she learned empathy, patience, and the quiet satisfaction that comes from helping others. One day, Mr. Hayes brought up a topic that had been on both of their minds. "Leela," he said gently, "I think it's time we talk about making this ranch your permanent home. You've worked so hard, learned so much, and grown in so many ways. I want you to have a place where you belong, and I want to be here to support you." Hayes smiled warmly. "Of course, Leela. You belong here just as much as anyone else. This is your home, and you will always have a place here." It was a place where she could retreat when she needed quiet, a sanctuary where she could reflect on her day and dream about the future. She decorated it carefully, filling it with objects that made her feel safe, happy, and inspired. School became a new adventure for Leela. Though she had spent much of her early life feeling isolated, the confidence she had gained on the ranch helped her approach her studies differently. She participated more, spoke up when she knew the answers, and even helped other students who were struggling. Slowly, some of the children who had once teased her began to notice the change. They saw a young girl who was kind, confident, and intelligent, a girl who had overcome loneliness and fear to find her place in the world. Though not everyone welcomed her at first, many began to treat her with respect, and Leela learned the importance of patience and understanding in winning hearts over time. Leela's bond with Mr. Hayes remained strong. He continued to mentor her, teaching her not only about animals and ranch life but also about life in general. He spoke about honesty, responsibility, and the importance of showing kindness, even when it was difficult. Leela absorbed every word, realizing that these lessons were not just about survival. They were about building a life that was meaningful, fulfilling, and filled with love. The villagers, too, began to notice the transformation in Leela. When she walked through the streets, she carried herself with a quiet confidence that drew attention. People began to see her as more than the girl they had once shunned. Some approached her to apologize or express admiration for her bravery. Others, inspired by her courage, began to show more compassion to children who were different or struggling. Leela's journey had become more than a personal story. It had become a lesson in resilience, kindness, and the power of acceptance. Leela's days were filled with simple joys. She loved helping Mr. Hayes feed the animals, collect eggs, and care for the fields. She took pleasure in watching the sunrise over the hills, feeling the soft morning air on her face, and listening to the gentle sounds of nature. She painted pictures of the animals, wrote stories about her experiences, and often imagined adventures that she might one day have. Each day was a new opportunity to learn, grow, and experience happiness in ways she had never thought possible. One afternoon, while sitting by the pond with Toby at her side, Leela reflected on her journey. She thought about the years she had spent alone, the rejection she had faced, and the pain she had endured. And then she thought about Mr. Hayes, the ranch, and the animals who had become her friends. A sense of gratitude filled her heart. She realized that even though life had been difficult, it had led her to a place where she could thrive, learn, and be loved. She understood that her past struggles had shaped her into someone strong, compassionate, and capable of caring deeply for others. The bond she had developed with the animals taught her more than any book or lesson could. She learned patience, responsibility, and empathy. She saw the value of small acts of kindness, whether it was giving a gentle pat to a nervous horse, speaking softly to a frightened dog, or feeding a hungry chicken. These experiences reinforced the lesson that true care requires attention, love, and understanding, and that these qualities were what made life beautiful and meaningful. Evenings at the ranch remained magical. Leela often sat with Mr. Hayes as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange, pink, and purple. They would talk about the day, the animals, and her dreams for the future. Mr. Hayes encouraged her to set goals, to think about the kind of person she wanted to become, and to believe in her ability to achieve great things. Leela listened eagerly, feeling inspired by his words and comforted by his presence. She knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she would have guidance, support, and love to help her navigate them. The ranch also became a place where Leela could help others. She began to assist in caring for animals that were abandoned, sick, or injured. She offered help to neighbors who had pets, teaching them how to care for their animals properly. In doing so, she discovered that her experiences, her struggles, her empathy, and her patience were gifts that could benefit others. She realized that her difficult past had given her insight, compassion, and the ability to make a positive impact on the world around her. Leela's relationship with the villagers continued to evolve. Some of the children who had once teased her began to approach her, asking for advice or simply wanting to play. Though she remained cautious, she found joy in forming these new connections. She learned that people could change, that kindness could inspire others, and that patience and understanding could build bridges even after years of hurt. Leela's journey had shown her that acceptance and love were not given automatically. They were earned through compassion, courage, and the willingness to embrace others without judgment. With each passing day, Leela's confidence grew stronger. She walked taller, spoke more freely, and faced the world with a newfound courage. She understood that she was worthy of love, respect, and happiness, regardless of what others might think. The experiences on the ranch had taught her that her value was not determined by her appearance or by the opinions of others, but by the strength of her heart, the kindness she showed, and the love she shared. Eventually, Leela began to dream about the future in ways she had never dared to before. She imagined a life where she could continue to help animals, care for people in need, and inspire others to be compassionate and kind. She thought about traveling beyond the village, learning more about the world, and sharing the lessons she had learned with others. These dreams filled her with excitement and motivation, and she knew that with determination, courage, and the support of those who cared for her, she could achieve anything she set her mind to. Through it all, the ranch remained her sanctuary, a place where she could be herself, where she could grow, and where she could find happiness every day. Leela had discovered that love, kindness, and patience could transform even the loneliest and most difficult circumstances into a life full of hope and joy. She had learned that being different was not a weakness but a strength, and that true acceptance comes from within and from the people who truly care. Leela's story, once filled with sorrow and loneliness, had become one of hope, transformation, and inspiration. She had found her home, her family, and her purpose. The little girl who had been shunned for her smell, who had wandered alone and rejected, had become a young girl confident in herself, surrounded by love, and empowered to face the future. She had discovered that even in a world that could be cruel, there were places and people that offered acceptance, compassion, and unwavering support. And most importantly, she had learned that she deserved to be happy, to be loved, and to live a life full of joy and meaning.